bit about me. Like you said, I'm a singer, musician, a voice teacher, an herbalist, and in my practice I combine my passion with plants and singing and bring them together in my studio to work with people who feel that they need some kind of support, liberating their sound, whether it's for singing, for speaking publicly, for finding their true voice, whether it's for expressing themselves artistically or just in their daily life and relationships. And so I created this little mix of workshop, lecture, immersive thing where you might get a little bit of taste of some of the liberations that I make, some of the plants that I personally love to work with, how to work with these plants if you are interested in incorporating them into your life. I'll also speak a little bit about the thing at some point. Later on in the presentation, I will ask you if you're willing to do a couple of breathing exercises for me and a couple of basic vocalization exercises to get us a little bit connected to our bodies today and to try and understand this beautiful relation between body, voice, spirit, and expression. So the structure is going to be mainly me talking about some plants. Some of them I go more in depth in, others I mention briefly. A little disclosure or disclaimer. When it comes to working with medicinal plants, it's always good to know what you're working with. This is not a foraging trip, and this is not a botany class. I'm not going to be talking about identifying plants or where to find them in the wild. So if you do go foraging or you go seeking out certain plants in the wild, please make sure that you are 100% sure of what plant it is that you are taking. If you don't know, there's a lot of online resources that are free. There's good field guides. There's a lot of people giving plant walks in town. I'm one of them. There's online courses that you can take. So many ways. Just always be sure that what you are taking is exactly the herb that you were meant to take. This makes us happy. And if you are foraging for wild plants in and around town, be respectful and mindful that the plants are there. Yes, you can use them and incorporate them into your life, but they are not there just for you. Wildlife, insects, other people, other foragers, and just the balance of the biosystem is a fragile thing. If you find, say, a field of beautiful dandelion flowers and you want to pick a few to take home, the rule of thumb that I've heard used a lot is never take more than a third. A third can be quite extreme. In my opinion, I like to think of it as if you find a nice patch of plant that you're interested in, and you look at it, and you go in and you forage, and you take what you need, and when you leave, nobody can see that you were there, that you took anything. That's the right way to go. This way you know for sure you're not going to disturb next year's crop of that particular plant. I associate myself with the tradition that's called the white herb tradition when it comes to herbalism. It's a Western-based approach to herbal medicine, so there's a lot of influences and relevant points of contact with Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, but I focus and work mainly with plants that grow here close to my home. I try to stay away from very rare, very complicated to come by plants. I find working with the plants that grow around you is a better way to cultivate a closer relationship and is a bit more respectful, in my opinion, to you. Most of the plants that I work with I work with them as singles. That means I don't tend to make a lot of combinations of plants together, especially not in the beginning. When I'm starting to work with a new plant, I always work with it as a solo star and take my time to get to know the plant, try it out in different preparations for myself, see how I react to it, if it agrees with me or doesn't agree with me. Working with plants and cultivating a relationship with them is a lot like any other entity that comes into your life. You don't get along with everybody, you don't make friends with everybody, and that's natural. We all have different constitutions and different approaches and different needs, so not all plants are for everyone. Having said that, plant medicine is safe. It is something simple and accessible that anybody really can incorporate into their life. You don't need to have a degree in this. Most of this tradition is based on kitchen witchery, things that came down through the years from mother to daughter or grandmother to granddaughter or to the sons as well throughout the years. Most of it is information that was passed verbally, but we do have a lot of written accounts. Some of them relate to the God opinion, which I will speak of later on. So most of the plants that I'm going to let you taste, smell here today are already on the table. For hygienic purposes, I would ask if you want to taste some of the tinctures that I will pass around, don't take the pipette and drop it directly into your mouth to avoid any contact with saliva, obviously. What you can do is take a couple of drops and put them on this fleshy part of your hand, and then taste them, smell them. You can take as many or as few drops as you're interested in. If it's a plant that you've never come across before, I always say start small and trust your intuition regarding this. When I describe certain plants and what they do, some of them might speak to you more, some of them might go, and others you might feel, no, I haven't had that experience with that plant. So in that regard, trust your gut response to these plants when considering working with them. So I will pass things around at some point. Please be mindful, try and move it around in a way that everybody gets access to it. Like I said, most of them are tinctures, some of them are oils, and some of them are just dried plant materials. I do not have a presentation or anything to distract from the plants. If you are interested in finding out more information about ways to identify plants and how to be sure what you're working with, I can give you recommendations for books and guides and things like that, which we can. I'll start by asking, do a little show of hands. Does anybody here have any kind of experience working with medicinal plants in life? It could be in any way, shape, or form. All right, that's cool. And anybody who's ever had any interest in the voice, interest in singing in shallow counts? Yeah, all right. Anybody here that does any kind of public speaking, uses their voice professionally? Yeah, all right. Good. So I'll talk a little bit about Hildegard of Bingen very, very briefly. This is not a history lesson or any kind of presentation about her. But I found her to be a very fascinating figure in history. In case you don't know, Hildegard of Bingen, also known as Saint Hildegard, about 10 years ago was officially declared a saint in the Catholic Church. The disclaimer, I am not Christian, but a powerful woman that lived 1,000 years ago and wrote about herbs is my kind of jam. And I originally heard about her when I was studying musicology. I learned about her as a very influential and incredible composer of mainly local music in the medieval ages. Later on, I realized she also wrote 9 books and released them. Some of them are about mystic visions that she had since she was a child. She was given over to the monastery when she was about 8 years old, and there she learned to read and write and learn a little bit about medicinal plants, because many times the monasteries were little hubs of infirmaries for the local people. In the monasteries, they would usually have an herb garden growing and some kind of medicinal practice that they would offer to people coming in. And so she was exposed from an early age to the effect of medicinal plants. She had these visions since she was a kid. She describes it really since about the age of 3 that she had this experience of being flooded with an incredibly intense white light. In the beginning, she didn't truly understand what it is, but later on, started to realize that these are visions in a way. We have a lot of written material left from her, from the books that she published, but also from correspondences, letters that she wrote to people. And she goes into detail describing sort of internal process that she went through, incorporating or understanding what these visions really mean to her and how to work with them in her life. It was roughly around her 42nd year that she had a vision that was clear enough to tell her that actually she should be writing down, really putting down to paper and telling people and sharing with people what she's experiencing. And in her writings, she describes that she was very, very resistible to do with that. She was doubtful of herself. She would, have these visions, talk to only her like close circle of people in her life, but was kind of scared in a way, but also got a lot of bad advice, as she writes, as to whether or not she should share these things. And her resisting of this call, as you might say, rendered her very, very ill. She was bedridden for a long time, and her body, which was pretty frail to begin with from a young age, started deteriorating, and she had really a crisis in a way. And in her writings, she goes back and describes how, when it was she realized that she must give in to this call, she must share these things and make this leap of faith and share her creative, expressive inspiration with the world. That's when she connected more deeply to her source of natural energy and started writing like crazy. And she spent about 10 years writing these visions and creating illustrations of these visions. I have the book here if anybody wants to peruse later on. And within these visions, there were 2 or 3 themes that I personally connected to very deeply. One is the kind of image of the world, or the tree of life, as she called it, that she created. It's this circular, maybe I should have a presentation. It's a circular drawing of this tree of life that represents creation in her regards. And another element in that is that she coined a term that relates to this vision, which she calls viriditas, which essentially means greening power, or the green energy, creative life force, the force that makes trees blossom, that makes the fields go green in the spring, the force of creativity in human beings as well, and this kind of essentially, life force, this force of creation. Viriditas, the greening power. And when I think about this particular word, or about this essence in regards to herbal medicine, there is one plant that for me personally has been this kind of green power source. It's a plant that everybody's met, everybody knows, it grows everywhere, and it's the only plant that you can recognize in the middle of the night naked. Any guesses? It's nettle, it's stinging nettle. It's a very common herb that I'm sure everybody's come across, and it grows pretty much everywhere in all the parks, sometimes in the sidewalks, outside of your house. If you look for it, you'll probably see that it's there. I have a lot of it in the inner half of my building. It's intensely green. It's almost black green sometimes, depending on the certain specific species that grows. It has these tiny little hairs that have little dots of stinging material that can cause a little irritation to your skin if you come across it in a non-intentional way, so to speak. And it's one of the most nutritionally dense plants that are growing in the world. So one of the ways that I like to incorporate plants into my life, and that supports my creativity, my work, but also my expressiveness, so to speak, is by making a very, very strong infusion. The word infusion is often used to describe just a tea. You take a bunch of herb, you put it in a glass, you pour water on it, you've got an infusion. But I'm talking about a nourishing infusion. I think it's a term that was coined by herbalist Susan Weed, I'm not sure. But essentially this would mean you take a big jar that's heat-proof, you put about 30 grams of plant material, dry plant material inside. For reference, when you go to the bio market or something and you get loose herb, it's usually 30 grams, 50 grams, sometimes 100 grams, depending how finely they chop it up. So I like to get my plants by bulk. Online, there's good resources. Germany is incredible for this. So 30 grams of plant is quite a lot. Like, just for reference, this teeny little bowl of linden, which is not cut, is probably around 3 or 5 grams. If it was cut, it would take naturally a lot less volume. So working with cut plants is an easier way to get them to actually fit in the jar for what you're doing. You would take 30 grams of the cut dried plant and you pour over boiling water to fill out the jar and have it a kind of jar that you can seal, but then later be able to easily open. So if it's a screw top, There's these like two-part lids that are usually better because if you're closing something that's boiling, it might create a little bit of vacuum, and then later on it could be hard to open it. But so essentially, you let this sit for at least 4 hours. I like to let it sit overnight. This is a long steeping process in which all of the nutrients and the active constituents in the plant can be drawn out by the water. And it becomes usually a lot darker, a lot more intense. Sometimes the texture is also somewhat changed, especially say with linden. I'll talk about it a bit later. And this is an intense, nourishing infusion. Most of them taste very pleasantly. The nettle depends on you, really. For me, when I started drinking it, I thought it was fishy. I thought it was strange. I didn't know why I ordered a kilo of it. I let it sit. Most of it went bad. Later on, I grew to like it. It was like an acquired taste for me. Today, I think that it's a wonderful flavor, but really it's up to you and what your body likes and what you need at the time. The nettle is, when you make an infusion of it, it has a very high amount of calcium in it, a lot of minerals, essential nutrients, and about 10% proteins. That said, having that high quantity of protein in it is great, it's bioavailable, it's great for you, but will tend to make it go bad pretty quickly. So if you do make an infusion, after these 4 hours or overnight, you sift it, you squeeze the plant material out, and you drink it either throughout the day, the whole thing. If you want to drink a whole liter, you can drink as little as a cup, or as much as you'd like. And if you're not going to be using all of it the same day, put it in the fridge. That'll make it last at least 2 days. Other plants last a little bit longer. But regarding nettle has this, besides its extra intense nourishing quality that really helps to replenish all of the systems in the body and help people say that are worn out, tired, maybe have a bit of a slow digestive system, and need, to build power from the ground up. It also has this sharp quality to it, which is associated with breaking patterns, breaking habits, breaking out of their mold, essentially. When people come and want to work with the voice, a lot of the time they have, years of being stuck in the same kind of approach, or the same kind of method regarding this. Maybe they studied some voice when they were younger, or maybe they were told things about their speaking or singing voice when they were kids, and people tend to carry things with them and start to associate themselves with these experiences, with these memories. And nettle, I think, is a wonderful ally to start incorporating if you feel like you need support in breaking out of old patterns of the way that you identify yourself in regards to how you express yourself. So, cutting these old patterns away, but also, if you look at the history of the plant and how it was used, it's also very commonly used, to prepare corn, to prepare fiber, and this fiber was, in the ancient times, used to make nets, usually for fishing nets or for hair nets or all sorts of uses. So it has this two-sided quality to it, where on one hand you use it to cut, change, move away, but then also an energy to help you create new connections, weave something new in yourself. Hildegard works with nettle as a way to bring focus and work on memory, or anybody who's suffering from a deterioration of their mind. She used to work a lot with powdered herbs, meaning she would take the dried herb, powder it to a really fine powder, and then either take it internally or use it topically. In this case, with nettle, she would often mix it with a little bit of oil and rub it on the temples and on the head of people who seem to start getting forgetful or not so focused, find it hard to collect themselves in a way. That's a beautiful herb for that as well. You can also juice the fresh herb if you have a juicer, or if you're keen on more vesseling it for a couple of hours, because it's labor intensive in a way, but when you juice it, you don't need that high quantity of it. You can use as little as a spoon, and it's a very, very nourishing very nourishing herb for your lungs in that particular preparation. I like to offer it to people who come to my studio who sometimes find it hard to move out or completely clear any kind of infection that they had in their lungs. We've had a lot of that in the last couple of years. So Nettle, with this green lung energy, really helps to release the stuckness, right? So if you do choose to start incorporating herbal infusions into your life, go slow. Take it one time at a time. Decide what is, what feels right to you, and incorporate it slowly in a way that you can kind of stay connected to what's changing or what's coming out or coming about in your body as you consume it. I always suggest that if you are taking something new, you sit with it for a bit. If you're making an infusion or making a strong tea or making a decoction, you sit with it and you smell it first, you look at it, you let it, in through all of your senses, and you see what comes up in you in response to everything that the plant has to offer in that regard. Because plants, they have a certain quality and energy about them. It's perhaps not as clear or as well defined as it is with human beings or with other animals, but they definitely have characters. They have this directionality in a sense. And when you're taking them into your body, not only are you essentially using them as a building block to who and how you are, you're allowing them to shift you a little bit. They don't work like Western medicine drugs do. Western medicine drugs are usually just one or two constituents from a certain plant that were extracted out or synthetically manufactured in the lab, and they have very strong directional activity, which often brings with it a lot of side effects. When we take a plant that has this same active constituent, it also has hundreds, if not thousands, of other constituents in it that bring about a more balanced, so to speak, reaction in our body. I was talking about the lungs, so I think one of the most nourishing herbs for the lungs after nettle, not that I'm rating them by capability, is this little one. And have a little push around with it. It doesn't smell like much. Not quite a lot of it, I can let you all have a little feels. Does anybody recognize this one?
Yeah, also you know.
No?
No.
For those who don't have one here, I'll describe it. It's very fleshy leaf. It's got these tiny, but very dense, attached hairs on it. Just pass it to people. Is it Königskerze? It is. Königskerze? Which is mullet. Oh, yes. What is it? Mullet. Königskerze. Yes. Mullet. Mullet with a U. M-U-L-L-E-I-N. In Hebrew, I am Putzin. It's a biodynamic plant that grows all around Berlin. I've seen it pretty much everywhere. On the first year, it forms a little rosette, so it's just. Did everybody get a little peck? Yeah. It forms a little rosette on the ground, and on the second year, it brings out also a huge stalk that is sometimes 2 meters high, and it's really wide. It looks almost like a flame torch. It has these tiny, beautiful yellow flowers that just pop out randomly, not in one go, but like they keep opening in different parts of it. And these fleshy leaves are an incredible food for the lungs. So again, anybody who's had feeling of constraint or closing, whether it's from a lung infection, from COVID, long COVID, or breathing problems, if you had breathing problems as a child, if there's anything in you that feels energetically blocked in the area of your lungs, mullet is a very good herb to try and incorporate into your life. You could make an infusion of it, like I described of the nettle, but you can also burn it, use it for smudging. So burn it and inhale the smoke. Some people smoke it as a tobacco substitute. It's actually very nice, and even has an ability, if you are, use caution if you have a very intense lung infection where you feel like the bronchioles, everything is tightening and closing. Inhaling a little bit of smoke, whether from smoking or from actually rolling with a cigarette, can really help ease a little bit of that tension. It has a slight painkilling quality to it, very, very mild. And I like to work with it also with people who come and want to work with their voice, but are very, very dependent on tobacco, and find that that creates a cycle in which they don't have their full breath available to them, essentially. Mullein, either by drinking it or smoking it, can really help you move away from addiction, and also give you this kind of support or a slight substitute while you're doing this. It's very easy to find. It grows in many parks. If you do harvest it, you usually don't need to harvest a lot because the leaves sometimes get to be this big, and one leaf goes a really long way. You can also buy it commercially, dried, cut, and sit. It's this kind of plant where, energetically speaking, it's been associated with the higher self, connecting to who we truly are or what we truly are. I've heard a lot of people use the flower essence of this plant. I personally haven't had the chance yet to try that out, but I do know that the flowers themselves have also this pain-killing quality, a little bit anti-inflammatory action. You could use the flowers infused in oil to help with ear infection and earache, anything to do with a lot of tension in the face, in the jaw, like TMJ, people who grind their teeth, people who have a lot of congestion or held energy in their face. Then mullein infusions and also mullein flower oil used topically be very beneficial. Let's see. So about mullein oil, it's one of the oils that I like to go to among the few others that I will talk about now when it comes to working from the outside in. So if you feel like when you want to express yourself, maybe the energy is there, maybe you feel you already know what you want to say, but that you have physical, muscular flux, right? That maybe your shoulders like to go really high up and close off, or that your chest is constricted, or that your jaw doesn't really want to open wide enough to let the sound out, or that your neck is stiff, or that there's, something very muscularly tense about you. When working with herbal oils, massaging the areas that you feel need this attentive care, it's a very good way to start moving this energy around. So like I said, mullein oil for the jaw. The two other oils that I use a lot are dandelion flower oil and St. John's wort oil. Dandelion, I think, is also kind of plant that everybody knows, grows everywhere around the world. It's considered a weed, but it's one of the most medicinal plants that you can find. It's medicinal, and all of its parts are consumable. You can eat and use as medicine: the root, the stalk, leaves, flowers. Dandelion is strongly associated with the solar plexus and this kind of core of the body. So working with it, say as a tea or as a tincture or as an infusion, is a good way to stir up stagnation in the guts or in the stomach, to strengthen your digestion and better improve the functioning of your liver, which is essentially the organ that makes you live, that helps you be more present, more alive. I like to use dandelion both internally and externally for people who have a problem with expressing anger. For me personally, it's been a great benefit. I like to take it with a bit of dandelion before I go and practice the kung fu or something to get some energy out and connect to repressed emotion, connect to repressed anger or fear or anything that kind of tends to sit inside the body and prevent us from being able to move freely or express ourselves. So this one I don't think I'll move around with. It's sticky and problematic, but this is dandelion root tincture. It started off clear, but this is the color that it is now. I'm using it for about a year now. If you are harvesting dandelion root, it's best to do that before or after the flowering. essentially. So generally speaking, if a plant is in flower, most of the energy of the plant will be in the flower, so then it would be a good time to harvest the flowers and use them, maybe to make an oil, or to make flower essence, or to use them in a tea. Many, many benefits. But if you are going for roots, better come with a big knife to pull them out, try and leave them intact as you can. You can brush off the ground, wash them. Then you can either dry them and use them in teas and decoctions, or you can roast them and make like a coffee substitute, which I find tastes really nice. Or you can make a tincture. And this is the kind of stuff that I will use for deep work. Somebody who comes and really has, perhaps they're not even aware yet that they are scared of their own sound, scared of what they have to say, scared of being alive in a way. Dandelion is a good way to, start things up a little bit, maybe move it from deep down inside. And then I would maybe use it simultaneously with the dandelion flower oil to help release the kind of tenseness in muscles that usually indicates an emotional background. So people who have a lot of, say, tension in the jaw, tension in the face, it's kind of closing off. So essentially it's like your body has been stopping you from saying what you want to say, right? By really closing and tightening these joints or these areas. So applying topically is a good way to start getting that energy and emotion so that it becomes more accessible to people. Or either it will rise up from the subconscious and things will start, becoming more malleable. You could start working with them. Hello. Time. I think I was thinking of one more plant and then we'll do some reading. So I have here the dry plant and also the tincture. And move it around and see. It's good, like for people who joined a bit late and are interested in tasting some of the tinctures, I mentioned at the beginning that it's better not to drop them straight into your mouth or bring them anywhere in the vicinity of saliva. Take a couple of drops, put them on the fleshy part of your hand. Enjoy. Yeah, so the disclaimer about this one, what I'm passing on this side, that will come to that side later, is a tincture, meaning this is fresh plant material that was steeped in vodka, which is my preferred mixture most of the time. Making a tincture is as easy as any other kind of herbal remedy preparation. I like to make tinctures with fresh plant material. Some people make them with dried, but because oftentimes the active constituents in plants are, they can be alcohol soluble, but they can also be water soluble. And once you dry the plant, you really lose a lot of qualities, essentially. And if you steep them in alcohol, use the alcohol that you like. It's better to use an alcohol that is as close to 50% alcohol as it can be. It's really hard to come by here. I usually just go for vodka that's around 40%. It's easy to find a cheap one at like a nickel or something. And it transforms beautifully after sitting with the plant material. So you need a jar, the plant material, whatever it is you want to tincture. You fill the jar all the way up in the sense that it's full, a little bit bouncy inside, not so cramped that if you turn it around, nothing will come out, but also not like half full or too loosely in there. You want a good ratio of plant to menstruate. Then you cover it with alcohol of your choice and you seal it. The alcohol has to cover the plant substance and really almost reach the top. You close it and you put stick around to know what it is because you won't remember. And then tinctures, 6 weeks is a sweet spot. I often let things sit for much longer. If it's a fresh plant material like leaves or flowers or stalks, 6 weeks is enough. If you really need the support of the plant, you could start using it as often, as the next day if you'd like, but you only really get all the goodness out of the plant after about 6 weeks. For things like roots and berries or dry berries, a year is a good time. Again, you could use it before, but I can tell you that after 6 weeks, this did not look like it does now. So a lot more of the goodness of the root kept getting sucked out. And roots I leave in, even when I use the tincture already, but fresh plant material I sift out and put it in a rejar jar, essentially. So what I've been passing around here as a dried flower and here as a tincture is yarrow. Has anybody ever heard of yarrow? Yarrow. Stave in German. So, acclaim it's called because it has these beautiful, dense flowers that almost look like a surface area of flowers, and the leaves are small and very tightly serrated. They look like they have 1,000 leaves on them. That's what that name is. Medicinal 1,000 leaves. Also, a wild plant that grows everywhere around Germany. Very easy to come by. You can get it as a dried flower in biolabs and tea shops and everywhere. In this case, I made it into a tincture. For the tincture, I use the whole flowering top. So, yeah. Yes, the flowering top meaning everything that's not, I take a little bit of space from the ground, depending how high the plant grows. Chop it up roughly. I don't chop it up too finely or grind it or anything. And then cover it with the alcohol and let it sit. So yarrow, originally it's known as a very important herb for battlegrounds. I'm sorry, it's been called soldier's wound wort because it has this quality of being able to stop bleeding very, very quickly. It used to be used also as like a chopped fresh plant to be stuffed into gruesome bleeding cuts to help the bleeding stop. Hildegard used to use it a lot, but also again powdered. She would use it to disinfect wounds, sometimes mixed with wine, which was the easiest alcohol to come by at that time. And so externally we would use it for anything to do with infection on the skin, bleeding, cuts, things like this. But then internally, I like to use it a lot as a way to work with internal wounds. Anybody who's coming and perhaps, I don't know, a case scenario, somebody comes in as a child, they were told that their voice is unpleasant, or that they should shut up, or that what they have to say is not interesting. Somebody hurt them internally in a way that has been, enmeshed in how they perceive themselves, so that now when they come and they want, they have an urge to express themselves, to open their voice, to speak out, but there is this pain inside, or there is this kind of I suppose a disbelief to one's true abilities. This is a very good plant to work with. In the singing or the voice studio, I would use it almost like a singing meditation. You would take a couple of drops of the tincture, sit with it, breathe, see where it feels in the body, talk about where this experience maybe stemmed from, and work towards healing these internal emotional wounds with this plant. Yes.
How about the yarrow? I always wondered about plants that stops bleeding. They usually just smear dried herbs, or they have to soak it up in water to get the constituent to help keep them.
No, with yarrow particularly, you use just the plant as it is, chop it up, put it on in case of an emergency. You find yourself somewhere and really have a concussion wound, and there's yarrow there, stuff it in.
Even if it's dry.
If it's dry. The plant itself, if it's growing, it's fresh and it has water content in it, right? So you also use it as a poultice, meaning you chew it up in your mouth, spit it out, and put it on, depending on the situation. Some people walk around and they have it powdered, they carry it as a powder. Today we have different things for this kind of SOS treatment, wounds. It was maybe different 1,000 years ago, but it's still a very useful. Some people walk around with a tincture in a spray bottle. You can use that to disinfect things. It's also a little bit mosquito repellent, I think.
Same thing with like the steak.
The same thing, different. We can go talk about that afterwards if you like.
Right.
Sure. Has everybody had a taste of yarrow? It's coming along. I think so, because we're starting to run out of time. I'd like to do a couple of breathing exercises and then very basic vocal exercises with you. It'll be short. If anybody feels uncomfortable or not interested, you can just observe. There's no problem. Anybody who does want to try, I urge you to sit with both of your feet on the ground, maybe a bit closer to the edge of your seat. This way, your back will be straight or aligned, stomach is loose. You can start with maybe, even though we're sitting down, shaking a little bit, sitting down. Lots of energy. Feet are on the ground. Try to have them also at a 90-degree angle as soon as possible. When we're sitting, the back is straight but not held. Imagine as though you have maybe a string connected to the top of your head and it's hanging from the ceiling. So there's a softness to it, but also a straightness that allows. You start taking a deep breath together. And exhale. It's a good breath. Let's do another one. So one of the things that I like to give a little information about, if you are interested in working with the voice and you don't have any experience, but you feel like you would like to speak more, to sing more, and do it in a way that doesn't tire you out, then the very basic first thing is to connect the voice to the breath. Obviously, when we speak, we use air, so the voice always sits on the breath to a certain extent. But where does the power come from? When you speak, do you ever feel like you have to lift your head, you have to close your jaw, try to scream, get sound out, and this kind of search for energy in the muscles of the neck and of the face is bound to end either in exhaustion, injury, and blockage, more violent. So connecting the voice to the breath means incorporating a deeper, more abdominal breath, connecting ourselves to the muscles of the abdomen and the lower back. First exercise will be to take a deep breath and exhale on at your own time. Do it and continue exhaling until you feel the air is starting to run out. When it's close to running out, give a little squeeze in your stomach muscles to really get all the air out. And once it's really done and you need a breath, don't think about breathing in, but just relax your abdomen muscles and see how that feels. So what we're going for is creating a little pumping action, closing and using our control over our abdomen muscles to squeeze all the air out. And then by releasing, just releasing, you are letting the air essentially pour into you without needing to take controlled breath. You just have this experience of the air flowing back in. When you are exhaling on it, use the minimum amount of pressure that you need to get that. So no clenching of the jaw, no frowning, relaxed face, soft face. Just the tongue between the teeth. You can continue a little bit while I explain. When we are creating this resistance, essentially, putting the tongue between the teeth while we are exhaling, it gives us a better way to gauge air pressure. Right? When I talk, air just comes out. It's almost like going, right? Air is just flowing out of my mouth, and there is no true sensation as to how much air. When we start by incorporating breathing exercises that connect us to the air pressure, it helps us establish a better control over how much air and how and where the air goes. So the next step after we do this for a couple of times will be to do pumping actions on this. So anybody whose body is shaking a little bit is doing really well. So what we want is this pump of the abdominal muscles. Very good. Next step from this will be to start lowering the resistance. So it's very high resistance. The mouth is almost closed. The next step from this will be to open a little bit, to go to something like shh. So before we start, I'll do 3 times. What I'm doing is I'm changing or lowering the level of resistance in my mouth, but keeping the same kind of interaction and the same kind of pumping mechanism going on, so that the body starts getting acquainted with this feeling of like, okay, even though there is no resistance, I'm still engaging in the same way. So let's try it. 3 of each, okay? And Again, these are super simple exercises that you can feel really comfortable to try at home anytime. If you need this kind of reminder, this connection to the breath in regards to preparing to speak, to sing, to do anything really, or to invigorate yourself a little bit. Moving on from this, I like to focus, especially in situations like this, where some people like to sing, some people don't like to sing, some people find it fun, intimidating, whatever. Talk more about the reflex and the basic functioning of the voice. I'm not going to give a big description of how the voice box sits and how the vocal cords work. It's too much. I can only say that, essentially, their original cause or reason for being there was to save us from losing air during really exertive, really intense activity. Have you ever tried to lift something very, very heavy? What does the body do? Right? See all those lifters. So what essentially happens is you're suddenly asking your body to do something very intense. And the reflex, the response of the body is to preserve the air in the lungs. Because if you try to lift something heavy and all the air comes out, essentially it's like cutting your hair off, you've got no energy. You can't do it without the air in your lungs. So the vocal cords slam shut to keep the air in your lungs, right? Try that. Now, we can do it in an extreme way, right? We can also do it very gently. So you can experiment for yourself with this range of dynamics. It could be really strong, but for singing or for speaking, you only need the minimum of it, really. And this is to get you acquainted with the feeling of, this is me closing my vocal cords. Right? So if we incorporate the exercises that we did before to connect our breath to the stomach. So again, if you've got something going on, you need to use your voice, you want to warm up. Some people today, there's a couple of speaking trends that are very problematic in the sense where they encourage stylistically people to use way too much air when they speak. So either they talk like very airy, very soft, or there's people who have what we call vocal fry. Essentially, it's this kind of almost like a slacking of the muscles of the larynx, and then people speak like this. There's quite a lot of people who speak like this. It's very common. But so when you have this going on, the vocal cords are not closing properly. You're losing a lot of the air. And so if you have this, sometimes you have it for a little bit, and when you're tired, it comes and goes. It's a very good way for there to some kind of vocal fatigue, where you want to use your voice more, you want to project more, but there's just no energy there. Even if you're connecting to your breath, everything is leaking, essentially. So connecting again to this reflex of the body, just thinking, uh-oh, like, uh-oh, something happened. Uh-oh, So feeling the vocal cords close, and then letting the air through, having a good onset of sound. I could go for hours like this. I should have started like this. Using all of these already ingrained in us responses, the ways that we use our voice in speaking and in interaction, is a good way to connect back to the basic functioning abilities. So to move away from loss of air or like a lethargic approach to this. Getting kind of close to the end. I want to see if there's something that I will really beat myself up about. I don't know how to. Yeah. Last thing. So, whatever reason that you're interested in voice or expressing yourself, if you do start incorporating this into your life, I urge you to consider this as something that you're doing mainly for yourself. Using sound, using resonance, has its healing qualities. We can't go into that because I have 8 minutes left, but if you are creating sound with your body is essentially an echoing chamber. You have different spaces that can vibrate depending on how you produce your voice. Whether you're singing mantras as part of your practice, you just like to sing, you sing in the shower, you sing for yourself, you perform, whatever it is, it's good to come back to it and remember that your voice is there first and foremost for you, for your own experience of life, and the way that you use your voice is completely up to you. Of course, there's different standards and different styles and things that people, go for or appreciate or trends and stuff like that. But when you get down to it, your voice is your own, and even changing how you perceive it from being, something that maybe I'm ashamed of, or something that I have a problem with, or something that I wish I was better at. Instead of being in that mindset, using plants and using mindfulness practices or whatever it is that you do, to take back your voice, and use it for yourself also as a basic element of sound. Sitting with yourself, singing to yourself, humming for your own body, in your body. If you sit and you hum and you use your voice, you can explore. You should let yourself be free to move your voice around and have it vibrate in yourself in a way that is pleasurable, that is healing, that is soothing to you, first and foremost. And from there, it's much easier to connect to it and use it in a setting where you have to, give it to people, right? No. Does anybody have any questions? No? Did anybody get missed out on or anybody wants to taste or try anything else that hasn't been? Yes.
So I have been absorbing in spring, and I was told that there was such flower and steam to not absorb because it's called oxalic acid.
Start short, well, now, depending on the weather and where you are, it sometimes has, it's not just one life cycle where it starts in the spring and ends. You have to look at the plant particularly if you're foraging and what stage it is in. It's easy to tell if it's flowering or in seed or post-seed. You can tell by how fibrous and how rough the plant looks. Essentially what you say is that for you it's much better to find fresh, young, that will grow it. And it grows fresh also, maybe not in the dead of winter, but also now. I've seen a lot of sources. So if you are going foraging, just make sure, it should be a smaller plant, it should be less fibrous, it should have a more vibrant green color to it, right? And no flowers or seeds on it.
Do you have a recommendation for when the voice for work, when the voice is low or even run away?
If the voice goes away completely. Yeah. Well, my first recommendation would be to try and figure out why that happened to begin with. Because of course you could use a lot of herbal remedies to help if you have any kind of, laryngitis, inflammation, hoarseness, things like this. But, any herb, really any kind of mint family herb in honey would be amazing. There's a plant called slippery elm that you can make little sucky things from, and it helps to coat your throat, it helps with irritation and redness and all of that. But if you're losing your voice, and if it happens often, I would say like more than once every 5 years, I would consider often, then why is this happening? Having some kind of maybe a consultation, trying to look at the way that you use your voice, your way of life, your choices, and see what you can start tweaking there to change that. Or, maybe go to a speech therapist, a voice coach, anybody who can listen to how you use your voice. A lot of us have speech pathologies or use our voice in a way that could potentially turn into a problem, right? Most of the time it's not a problem, but then when you need an extreme use of it, then problems can present. So that would be my first advice. Linden also, very good for, coating things, making things a bit more slimy and smooth.
How careful should one be with allergies or potential allergies?
Okay, if you know that you have allergies, you know exactly what they are for. Have you done an allergy test?
Yes, but I don't know allergies that were not tested. Like he was talking about specific things that I'm not sure what can be tested.
Well, in this case, use precaution, always a good idea. Start with a very small amount, like I said anyway. Sometimes very good for allergy. Allergy kind of indicates that the body's, that the immune system tends to get overexcited or overreactive to certain things. And sometimes using herbs and metals especially is very good for allergy. Could kind of counterbalance that or change a little bit from like the functioning of your immune system so that maybe it won't jump for every little thing. Understand? So but just start small.
Okay. Follow-up question. You said these things, right?
I don't sell herbs. I make I make a lot of preparations and I like to give them to people. People come to have, I give herbal consultations. So if somebody wants to come and have a one-on-one talk, we can talk about the herbs that they want to incorporate, and then I can guide you in the direction of where to source these herbs, how to make these preparations. I personally believe that, again, that's why I use symbols. I like to use an herb as it is. So if I give you St. John's or a tincture, you know what it is, you know what you responded to, and if you want to make it, you can just make it yourself. You won't become dependent on me to have this, secret elixir remedy that has a certain ratio of plants that you'll never know exactly how to recreate. So that's just my ethos, that's how I work. But of course, I share my knowledge, and I can gift or give or sell for a very, minimum charge and stuff that I make for it myself. But I feel like, teaching person fish is better. So thank you everybody for coming.